to this computer. So I will state that this is a recording of the April 22nd USS Seattle Veterans Association Zoom call with Captain Jim Byrne and the crew of the USS Seattle. Thanks, Jim, for being here. Much appreciated.
Okay, well, let me first say that I'm just impressed being an aviator. Obviously we didn't get a lot of interactions with the other ships, and I'm just impressed that you not only have a Veterans Association of a couple people, but a full-fledged having meetings and get together and website and all that sort of stuff. I'm not sure, again, I'm not real familiar, but I'm not sure there's a lot of other ships that do that. So Seattle must have had something special. I'm not sure what it was, but all of you are proof that there was something there to keep like this. I had the privilege to be the Air Wing commander on the Midway during Desert Storm. I'll talk to you a lot about what we did, and it's not dissimilar from what most of the other carriers did over there. Midway and CAG-5 were forward deployed to Japan, of course, since 1972. We were the Navy's only forward deployed air wing and carrier. It was a unique air wing also in that it was actually called the Midway Air Wing, which is the only one in the Navy like it. We had 2 A6 squadrons, 3 F-18 squadrons, and then EA-6Bs, Helos, and E-2s. We didn't have any F-14s, sorry, Captain Honor, but no F-14s and no S-3s, which, as it turns out, was ideal air wing for Operation Desert Storm, since there was basically almost no air-to-air threat, and there obviously weren't any submarines. So we were kind of the ideal air wing to participate in Desert Storm. Understand now, Midway was about to embark on its farewell deployment prior to retirement. We were scheduled for a 4-month deployment with 3 Australia ports and Bali and then Hawaii and then retirement. Instead, we spent 6 months in the North Arabian Sea and Persian Gulf, not unusual for all of those Navy folks. We were there for both Desert Shield and Desert Storm. We actually got to the North Arabian Sea on the 1st of October, 1990. And then we went from the North Arabian Sea into the Persian Gulf for the first time on the 1st of November. We spent Christmas of 1990 in Abu Dhabi. They don't have a lot of Christmas spirit in the UAE. I'm not sure why, but they just didn't seem to quite get with the season. And as you know, on 17th of January, 91, the kickoff of Operation Desert Storm. As you may also know and remember, Saddam won the toss and elected to receive. And so he did. CAG-5 aircraft from Midway put the first bombs of the war on target 0300 17 January. More on that later. It was an exciting time. We had kind of a unique perspective since we had covered both Desert Shield and Desert Storm. There were a lot of transitions that happened during that time frame. We started out planning strikes into Iraq from the North Arabian Sea with massive Air Force tanker support. Of course, we ended up launching strikes from the Persian Gulf and doing our own tanker support. We went from strategic targets early in the war, Navy base, comm facilities, bridges, airfields, things like that, to more tactical targets as we moved into the war, ships, kill boxes, which I'll talk about. We went from low altitude to medium to high altitude. And the reason for that I'll mention is because the Navy lost 6 aircraft during the entire Operation Desert Storm evolution. 3 of them were lost the first night at low level. Most night, the A6 course was designed to do that kind of mission, which is the aircraft I flew in. We were going in 200 to 500 feet at night, and it was difficult because when you go in low, you like to use terrain to mask you so they can't shoot at you. Well, it's pretty flat out in the desert, you know? And we found out rapidly the first night that they had a lot of guns. Most of them weren't radar guided, but they had a lot of guns. Target the first night for 4 aircraft was the Shaiba airfield, which is up by Basra in southeastern Iraq. And 2 aircraft were going into Al Jaber airfield in Kuwait, where we expected a hangar that we thought were some chemical weapons stored there. You probably saw all the video from Baghdad the first night with all the stuff going off in the air. It looks a lot worse without being on tape. It's very similar. I'm sure everyone out there has probably been to Disneyland at some point. You can imagine flying through the fireworks display at Disneyland, except instead of pyrotechnics, there were bullets out there. They had a lot of guns. We couldn't train mask, so we entered a lot of opposition. We had what we called red and yellow BBs, which was different caliber of AAA guns. And of course, again, this is at night, and you could see the yellow BBs, which was a higher caliber, the red BBs, and then the one that no one liked to see was the red fire hose, which was a gun they had called the ZSU-23, similar to CWIS, very high rate of fire. And when they would shoot it, it would just be a constant stream of red, just kind of tracing through the sky, looking for something to hit. Those we didn't like to see. I will tell you a little story here. Please, no State Department involvement in this. But the first night, as I mentioned, 4 aircraft were going into southeastern Iraq. They were coasting in at low altitude at the Shah al-Arab, which is the division between Iran and Iraq. And as soon as they coasted in, what I just told you became evident, which is they had a lot of guns and they shot them all. And so these crews, being quick thinking, discovered that if they had a minor navigation error of 2 or 3 miles to the east, no one shot at them. Now, here's your choice. You can go right on the track you planned, or you can be 2 or 3 miles to the east and no one shoots you at you. Obviously, they made the right choice. The fact that 2 or 3 miles to the east happened to be Iran was kind of minor at the time. I mean, there was bullets coming up, you make quick decisions. And so everyone deviated somewhat to the east and made it inland. It didn't help much because they still had to turn back into Iraq for their target.
Couldn't that be considered the width of the line on the piece of, on the chart? It's the width of the line.
Yeah, and everyone had the same navigation error too, you know. Early in the war, as you all probably remember, Iraqis attempted the Great Escape. Their aircraft did okay. Majority of them made it to Iran safely. For the ships, it's hard to make a getaway at 15 to 20 knots. And so that's when the so-called Battle of Bubiyan happened in the Persian Gulf. The 29th of January, I think it went to the 1st or 2nd of February, just a couple of days. It really wasn't much of a battle. Their ships were sitting ducks. The Allied forces sunk 21 of the 22 ships that tried to get to Iran. So they weren't too successful getting there. Our first, I told you about the first night mission, which was the A6s. The first daytime mission was the F-18s going in at medium altitude to a missile storage facility. It was interesting when you look at the tape of their attack because it doesn't look like there's anything down there. And you see the bombs impact, and all of a sudden you start seeing things just flying through the air, right and left and up and down, as the missiles that they hit detonate and get secondary explosions, and actually many of them lit off and just took off flying somewhere. So it was an interesting mission. The second night, I was actually on a mission in the Northern Gulf. We called it ASR, Armed Surface Reconnaissance. There was a TNC-45, which is a small patrol boat, hiding under one of their oil platforms. Wasn't hiding quite enough, and I hit it with a laser-guided bomb, But as I was up there that night, we're in the second night of the war now, and there's a tanker just kind of cruising back and forth, making figure eights. And it's kind of like, there's a war going on. What is this guy doing? I came back and briefed and said, hey, this guy's just up there. Nothing, we didn't see anything that was provocative that would entice us to attack him, but he didn't belong there. The third day of the war, we did find out why he was there. One of my air crew was up there again on a surface reconnaissance mission, and the deck of the tanker had opened up and it had hovercraft going in and out of it. And so they got clearance to go ahead and attack it. They had 2 cluster bombs, which are bombs that contain lots of little bombs. They got great hits. I mean, the ship immediately dead in the water, on fire. It did create a somewhat gigantic oil slick, which we kept having to respond to messages from higher authority for several days. They told us we could bomb it, we did. Some significant missions that I remember the most for the air wing. We had one night, we had 4 A6s going to take out bridges across the Euphrates River. The furthest we went inland, we went about 120 miles into Iraq. En route, I was actually in the third aircraft, and we saw a missile launch, which is not comfortable if you're flying in an airplane, to see a missile launch and come up towards you. And we were ready to react. We both saw it. We said, okay, launch, prepare, make sure the ECM's on, get ready to move the airplane. And we realized this thing wasn't tracking at all. It was just going in the air. And it turns out that it was a Scud that they had launched, headed. It was headed south. We were headed north, so we crossed paths, but it never came towards us. Let me just say that we were more successful at hitting our target that night than it was. The other mission I can remember is a single aircraft night mission into Kuwait City Harbor. Tied up the pier there was a ship called the Stasilak. It was the ship the Iraqis were using to lay mines. And it was tied up at the pier there. We waited, we kept the responding chief say, is it there? No, it's not there. Okay, it's there. So one day it was there. We went in at night. A lot of AAA, several missiles fired, none of them successful. And we delivered 2,000-pound laser guided bombs into it and sunk it at the pier. So mine warfare at its best at the origin. Some other missions that stood out, I had an F-18 with a walleye, which is a glide bomb. And we had discovered that the Iraqis they had one helicopter that was capable of firing an exocet, which of course, all the surface people knew that was not good. Exocets, that's what had hit the ship a long time ago. And it was a very dangerous missile. They had one helo that could deliver it. And we found it, and it was draped with camouflage netting and all that, but we knew where it was. And so I had an F-18 pilot who was one of the people that tested the walleye, went in and took it out. And that eliminated that threat. The pilot, Bones Ashby, actually became an astronaut later. Although he's not my most famous Air Wing junior officer. I just did a presentation on Desert Storm for the Midway Museum a couple of weeks ago. And joining me was Senator Mark Kelly, who was a JO-A6 pilot when I was in the Air Wing. So we did have some people that turned out okay. We did plan a mission. It would have been very interesting. Just south of Kuwait City on the beach, there were 2 huge liquid natural gas tanks, probably, I don't know, 30, 40 yards in diameter, white. I mean, you couldn't miss them, gigantic. We planned a mission to hit those tentatively to see what would happen if we wanted to do that. They looked at it. They said the potential big boom would not be unlike a small nuclear weapon. Of course, without the fallout, but they opted that it might have wiped out a lot of Kuwait City if we had done that. So that was one of the missions that we did not carry out. As the war progressed, of course, there's transition from all those strategic targets into the tactical targets, preparation for the ground war. And one of the things we did, preparation for the ground war, was we got assigned kill boxes. These were basically 20-mile by 20-mile squares in Kuwait and southern Iraq. And basically, you went in there armed up with either iron bombs, Mark 82s, 83s, or cluster weapons, and you stayed in your box and you could blow up whatever you wanted in the box. If you could find something, sometimes there was nothing there, but if there was anything there, you were cleared to attack it. It's interesting. All, of course, was in preparation for the ground war, which ended up being a non-event for us because they really didn't need much support. They rolled so quickly and had so little opposition that even though we were geared up to provide support for them, it really wasn't needed. Two other things, 2 days prior to the end of the war, I had an A6 in the Northern Gulf on a surface recognition again, and an OSA, which is a small Russian type patrol boat that has a small boat, but it's got 4 gigantic tubes on it with surface-to-surface missiles, I'm sorry. And no idea where this is 2 days before the end of the war, so I don't know, he'd been hiding somewhere, but he was in the Northern Gulf, and they attacked him with a laser-guided bomb, and the video is quite impressive, because you see the bomb impact, and you can literally watch 4 secondary explosions, just gigantic plumes. They stayed there for probably 20 minutes, and there was nothing left. There was no boat. Everything was gone. Not surprising. The last night, I flew a mission, as did most of the people on the Highway of Death from Kuwait up to Iraq. They shot a lot of shoulder-fired missiles at us that night. We were above that altitude. We stayed above 10,000 feet, which is the top altitude for those. But we figured that the plan was, the more they shoot, the less they have to carry back to Iraq. So they'd shoot them there and there everywhere. A lot of lessons learned came out of this, particularly from the aviation side, for things like helicopters, armed helicopters. The British had in the Persian Gulf, had their Lynx helicopter, which carried a lot of ordnance. It was a really nice machine, but it didn't have a radar. So it couldn't find anything if it found that it could attack it. We had our LAMPS helos up there, of course, that could find periscopes. I mean, they could find anything. They had nothing they could shoot at. So we ended up partway through the war starting to team them up with putting a LAMPS out with a Lynx and letting the LAMPS find things, and then the Lynx would go out and strike it. But after that, we have now armed up most of our helos. For Captain Honor and our F-14 folks, we found out that single mission aircraft, particularly fighters, become very extra if there's no air-to-air opposition. And so after the war, F-14s got armed up and became very good bombers. Again, one of the advantages in my Air Wing without F-14s is every airplane I had could deliver ordnance. So it was very nice. Strike rescue, of course, if we had someone shot down, how do we get them? We asked that question early on, and several times we were told, well, the special forces are in there, the SEALs, the Army Rangers, don't worry, they'll be able to get somebody. Okay, well, how do we contact them? How do we coordinate that? Well, they might be busy, so we'll have to see. And so we went, no good. So we actually forward deployed some of my SH-3s, anti-submarine kilos, forward up in the Northern Gulf on some of the smaller ships. They don't have any armor. They're not equipped for that mission, but it was more, we needed to have someone there when somebody went down. And so they actually got really busy. They carried SEALs around to capture when the ship sunk in the Northern Gulf, picked up a lot of POWs up there out of the water. They carried EOD teams when they found mines and searched for mines in the Gulf. They would take the EOD people. Their most significant mission was 24th of January. They inserted SEALs to take a place called Kwaru Island, which is maybe a mile diameter island off the coast of Kuwait. Iraqis had actually put 32 of their soldiers out there on it. Uh, and my helos went in and started a SEAL team that captured the island. I think there were 29 POWs. I think 2 of the Iraqis or 3 were killed during the mission. None of the SEALs. I found out about this later because what they were doing up there was completely divorced from what we were doing. So I didn't hear about a lot of this stuff. Matter of fact, it's a little side story. When I was at Strategic Studies Group in Newport, one of my COs from the Helo Squadron was there as a student, and he invited me to an award ceremony one day at Newport. I went, okay. So I go to it, and they start reading this award for him about an air medal and about all the things he's doing. And it's like, wait a second. This guy's one of my COs. I have no idea he was doing this stuff in the Northern Gulf, low on fuel and almost this and that. And so it was interesting. But anyway, they brought me back, and actually I kept it for about 20 years. I've now given it to the Midway Museum. It was a small, like medicine type bottle, little round bottle, pretty innocuous. And the skipper gave it to me. He said, "You want to keep this, CAG, because this is really significant." And what it was sand from Kourou Island. And that is the first sand of piece of Kuwaiti territory liberated during Operation Desert Storm. Again, 24th of January, so it was right after, the week after the war started. So it was interesting. The Midway, we were on, as I said, on the Midway, 45 years old, so it was not the newest and shiniest carrier out there. In fact, interestingly enough, there were 6 Navy carriers that participated in Desert Storm, and only 2 of them were nuclear. The other 4 were conventional carriers, of which, of course, we have none now. Midway had 2 catapults and 3 wires, unlike most carriers. They have 4 catapults and 4 wires. But we averaged more sorties per day and more ordnance per day than any of the 6 carriers. Why? Well, one, as I said, we've been together since 1972, so we are a pretty good team and knew how everything worked. And we're forward deployed, so while everybody else had to worry about their OPTAR and how much they could afford to do things, we always had to give money back. We were always kept at basically maximum funding. So it was a really finely tuned team, and it turned out really well. Most amazing of all, even for the Air Wing commander, was how we were able to go from 0 to war overnight. We went from training missions with little blue practice bombs to fully loaded combat missions within 24 hours. It was impressive, very impressive. Of course, all of you out there, as I heard about your trips up and down the Red Sea and supplying folks, providing food, fuel, and of course, most important for anyone in the Air Wing, you provide us with the ordnance. You carried it around Persian Gulf or the Red Sea, and we were privileged to deliver it to its final destination. So one more thing that I wanted to say before, and I'd be glad to answer any questions. I don't have any, I think the statute of limitations is probably up on anything I say is bad, so I think I'd be clear for that. But much of what I talked about sounds exciting, and at times it was exciting. But none of it would have happened without the support that you folks provided. It enabled us, your support enabled us to do our job, and it turned out that we did it real well, and that means you did it real well. So thank all of you out there, particularly obviously the ones that were there for Desert Shield, Desert Storm, but all of you provided the support for all the time for us. We don't see a lot of that on the carrier and the guys flying off the front, but those of us who had to keep track of, hey, we're running low on laser guided bombs, we need some more, where are these at, and things like that. We know that that you played a really important role, so thank you for that. And with that, I'll answer any questions anyone may have.
Yeah,
So,
Jim, I got a question. How often did you unrep?
Gosh, probably every 3 to 4 days. It depended on what was going on, but they tried to do it every 3 to 4 days. I think the most they went was 5 or 6, and occasionally they do it every 2 days, just because of the way the cycle of ships. I think the folks from Seattle can probably tell you. Sometimes it just happens that you have to run to the other end of the Gulf or the other end of the Red Sea, and So it's one last chance to do an unwrap before you head there. So that was the average. I think 3 or 4 days is probably the average.
Did they tend to have a support ship, the same support ship attached to each carrier, or was it just kind of a lot? Could the support ship, unwrap any carrier?
I think the support ships in the Red Sea, the Seattle folks helped me out, are probably the same one in the Gulf. We had started with 2, and then we went to 3, ended up with 4 in the Gulf, and then you started out with, I think, 3 or 4 in the Red Sea, and then Roosevelt came around, and America came around. But it was the same thing, that support ships weren't tied to a carrier. They were tied to the group, the battle group that was there at the time.
We used to swap in and out with the Saratoga's battle group, right? So we were the only support ship sometimes in the Red Sea, and then it was whoever, I forget who was with the Saratoga. But then when everybody started forming up in the Gulf, we had everybody. When Roosevelt was there, the America was there, Saratoga, Kennedy. So then it became, collision became a big problem, potential collision with so many ships out there. But we would do anybody. We were unwrapping everybody and anybody. It was all based on who was where and who was in best position to provide the fuel and ammo. So
yeah, and as I said, it was and there was a lot more. The unwrapping, obviously, of the food and the organs is going to happen anyway. But nowadays, when everybody's nuke out there, you're not refueling too many people, carrier-wise at least. So it's changed a little bit that way. But the support ships would depend, and I'm talking your business here, so you guys jumped in and tell me what I want to talk about. But it just depended when the war was going on in the Red Sea and Persia, just really depended on where you were and what their cycle was and what your cycle was. I mean, it wasn't like, oh, wait a second, we're the Midway support ship. No. You're anybody in the Persian Gulf that needs something, just let us know, and they'd find out who's closest, who has what they need, and then they'd get it to them.
yes, that was
Jim, my
recollection.
related question was, if you were going to go to flight ops and you were doing a replenishment, were you going into the wind and launching while you were alongside, or did you wait till you broke away? Because in the Red Sea, we would be going south. The carrier would say they want to go to flight ops, and we'd actually just come about alongside and keep going, and they would launch.
We did that. It wasn't quite obviously as restricted as the Red Sea, but the Gulf wasn't, go wherever you want like the North Arabian Sea was. But yes, it varied what was going on and how far along they were. A lot of times it would be, okay, the unwrap's going to take another hour, we'll delay it. And then again, it depended on what the missions were for the air wing. If you had something that had a firm time on target, and then hey, you need to launch to make that, as opposed to you're going to a kill box, and so you can launch whenever you want, you can still do your mission.
Captain, this is David. Can you walk me through where did your intel come from? Did you have satellite images? Were people in Washington watching stuff and feeding information, or was it all stuff you guys got from your own reconnaissance? And then from that point, how long did it take you to create your battle plan and communicate it to your guys to be able to launch? And then how long was a particular source? And last question, how many did you do a day, or how often did you do that?
The intelligence came from 2 sources. One was the national type overhead, things like that. And the other one was our own reconnaissance. For instance, an example is this Faslac that I sunk at the pier in Kuwait. We knew he was in there, and so we'd plan a mission and launch at 1700, and at 1500 they'd get new intel in and go, hey, he's not there. Okay, another day, we'll have to go another day. Also the helo, the Exocet helo that was draped in the netting, we knew that was up there, and that showed up 2 days in a row, and so we launched that mission. So it was a combination of the two. There's the national type stuff was not quite as time sensitive as our own, obviously, because it was hours old, if not days. And then our own would either confirm or deny, okay, yeah, that's our target. Yeah, it's still there. It's in the same place. We did not, and one of the missions that I didn't get involved in because I didn't have F-14s. F-14s did tarps. We didn't have any organic, as such, recce assets. We stuck pretty much to Qasr, which was their Navy base, Kuwait City, and then Basra, which is where the airfield was and the port facility, and some comm facilities inland. But we didn't. I think the most, other than the bridge mission, where I said we went 120 miles, we probably stayed within 50 to 60 miles of the coastline. So you got a lot of the intelligence, particularly when we'd go up north, Bouillon Island, and where the Navy base was. Guys going on missions up there would come back and go, hey, a missile got shot at us from this area, things like that. So you'd get some real-time intelligence like that. But we didn't have any dedicated recce assets in my air wing. Now, the F-14 on the other carriers had the TARPS airplanes that did go out. And I know we used some of their photography and things like that. But the airplane, it wasn't really an airplane. The off border each day would come out of Riyadh. That's where it originated. Then it would get to the carrier, and the carrier, I happened to be on the carrier where the whole battle force commander was. So they would get it, and then they divvy it up to the carriers in terms of who's flying when. For instance, the second night of the war, we got a mission assigned to bomb the waterway out of their Navy base before they got to the Gulf. And we started planning it. It's going to be a tough mission because you had to lay what we call seeds, which are regular bombs, except they put special fuses on them, make them like mines. But you have to deliver them at low altitude. And we'd been in there the night before, and we knew what it was like at low altitude. No one was anxious to go back. And we started planning it. We were about an hour into planning when they realized, wait, Midway's not going to be flying then. That's a Ranger mission because they're flying them. And so Ranger got assigned, and unfortunately they lost an aircraft on that mining mission because it was I talked to their CAG over there who I knew well, and I knew a lot of the A6 people. It was a tough mission. They actually had to go in the waterway down to about 150 feet to get below the guns, which they had on each side, kind of shooting across. And they, as I said, they lost an A6 on that mission, which is unfortunate. Yeah, it depended on whose intelligence was, how real time it was, and then how it matched up with what the tasking was. You know, the tasking came out of Riyadh, and you could do some ad hoc things if you needed to, if something popped up. But normally, the ATO, the Air Tasking Order, had all the targets designated, and they had a lot more in there in terms of assets, in terms of reconnaissance and intelligence and things like that than we did out on the carriers. Well, we had a lot, but not as much as they did. Does that answer it, David?
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. How often did you fly? With daily, every couple? What's the capability? Your concentration as a pilot? I mean, how much can you do per day or whatever?
It was not because of if we'd have been in the North Arabian Sea and we're doing long range missions up there like we originally started when we first got there in October, and with the planning wise, you probably could only gone every other day because those were going to be like 6-7 hour missions with multiple tankings. But as it turned out, we were flying almost regular cyclic ops. I mean, we were taking off, and in 2.5 hours, you'd go up tank, hit your target, and come back. So time wise, it wasn't taxing. So yeah, it can be. I mean, I've planned in a previous tour. Actually, I was SEAL with Squadron. We were planning on some long range strikes against Iran. Long range strikes, and so I had a couple of flights that were like 10 and 12 hours, which is beyond what you're supposed to do in a single seat ejection or ejection seat equipped aircraft. It was we learned things about how do they're giving pilots that they didn't trust. But we found out the Air Force, they give the pilots uppers to keep them awake. And then downers when they get back to make them go to sleep and things like that. We went and looked into all that. Unfortunately, the Air Force had that down to a science, and Navy kind of like was, oh, what do you mean? I don't know. We're not going to give you drugs. So wait a second. I got to stay awake for 12 hours and then make a landing. You know, that was an interesting. It wasn't Desert Storm like, but that can wear on you. But for us, it wasn't a problem. It was almost cyclic ops. So you told everyone. I won't say everyone flew every day, but the carrier flew. Although we had different windows of flying, morning or evening or nighttime, but the carrier flew. And I'd say most people average, I think, between 30 and 40 combat sorties, and the war was, I believe, 90 days, something like that. Not 90, like 45, 50 days. I don't even remember. 17 January till the end of February. So it was not a problem.
Thanks, Captain.
So I have a question. Have you read Crusade by Rick Atkinson, or The Shield and the Sword, which covers the Navy in the Gulf War? And if you did, what did you think of it?
No, I've read two other ones. What was it? I'm trying to think of the name of it now. It was by one of the Intel guys. No, I have not read those specific ones. So no.
Okay. I recommend them. They were really good.
Anyone
John,
else?
would you put those titles into the chat box for everybody?
Yeah, I'm on my phone, so I'll you know what I'll do? I'll email them to you. Maybe you can send them out afterwards.
Thanks, partner.
Okay.
Jim, what was your biggest surprise?
The biggest surprise was the opposition down low at night in terms of just volume of ordnance that they would put in the air. I mean, it was unbelievable. I think that, again, that the tape CNN has of the first night in Baghdad is not dissimilar to what we saw, because you may expect it in Baghdad, but you don't expect it in Basra or someplace in southeast. But yeah, the volume of ordnance in AAA that they put up was pretty impressive in a bad way.
Jim, where were they getting all that ordnance from? Was that Soviet era stuff, or?
Yeah, most of their defensive equipment, airplanes, guns, everything was Soviet era.
When the I forget which plane it was, they got shot down. They were on the Saratoga, and I think one of the pilot was the aviator was captured, and they had him on the news. How did that?
Jeff Zahn, yeah.
Zahn, yeah, I knew. I couldn't remember his last name. I knew it began with a Z. How'd that affect morale? Because I know on the Seattle, like, we were ready. We wanted blood when we saw that. I mean, the entire ship was like fired up.
Yeah, that was Leitzel and Zahn, and they were on a H3 airfield, and they were at a low altitude first night. Same thing, and they found out the same thing we found out, which is where they got a lot of guns. Yeah, we had a similar occurrence, although unfortunately the outcome wasn't as good with the mining mission aircraft. Unfortunately, both those guys didn't get out of the airplane; they died in the crash. But yeah, down low was not the place to be. There's no hills to hide behind, no gullies to fly down. It was just flat.
But how did it affect morale for the air wing?
It affected the morale. I think overall, not bad, because they had actually. I mean, I've seen. Of course, they didn't show us this beforehand, but I've seen stuff that they used beforehand where they were figuring between a quarter and a third of the airplanes would be lost the first 3 days. Yeah. That's a lot of airplanes.
Yeah,
that's what they said. So when we only lost like one or two, now specific, particularly type aircraft, it affected. Obviously, an A6 gets lost, 2 guys are killed. The A6 squadrons, most of them probably know those guys, something like that. But on the air wing level, we were, I won't say we were happy that anyone got shot down, but the losses were so low, and particularly after the first night, when they didn't order us not to go down low. Admiral Arthur, who was the commander of the whole task force over there, just put out a message saying, "Hey guys, think about what you're doing. You know, there's a lot of opposition down low, and we've pretty much built a sanctuary in mid altitude. We've taken out most of the SAMs, and so everyone kind of got the message."
So, the whole battle scheme depends a lot on logistics. Did you run into any logistics shortfalls? Are there things on the carriers that you needed that you didn't have? And what were they?
Yes, we ran out,
Anything
we
from
ran
ice cream
out
to
of,
bullets to whatever.
no, we started towards the end of the war, we started getting really short of laser guided bombs, which is bad because as the war went along and the big targets went away and the targets got smaller and you had to be more accurate, that's what we needed. And that's what we started with. Obviously, a laser guided bomb is just the bomb body, which we had a lot of, but the laser kits, the system wasn't. This is the first time we used a lot of precision ordnance, in big volume. And so the system wasn't prepared for that. And so we never got to the point, I don't think, if I'm not mistaken, we never got to a point where we couldn't carry a laser guide bomb because we didn't have the kit. But I know talking to the supply people and the cargo staff and all those folks, we got pretty close towards the end to saying, hey, you guys got to stop. You can only use laser guided bombs on really specific missions because we're running short.
You got any LGBs on 84s?
Do you do LGDs on 84s?
Yeah, Mark 84s.
Yes. Yes.
What kind of targets you hit with those?
That's
The Mark
the
84 is like the 2000 guy. It's a big bomb.
yeah. We use those actually on that bridge hop I talked about, taking out bridges over the Euphrates. That was a Mark 84 LGB hop. Yeah, LGBs, 284 LGBs per airplane. We prefer 83s, 1,000-pound. Just the bomb itself more maneuverable. The 84 you had to be real careful with because if it got anywhere out of the laser basket, it wouldn't come back. So
Okay, so Midway wasn't the spring chicken. Were you on water hours?
pardon?
Midway wasn't any kind of spring chicken. Were you working on water hours?
No. Midway was chugged along real well. The Midway did excellent. We did have to take a 5, and this was unfortunate for us at the air wing level because we hated to see it happen. But we took out 5 days right before the ground war to have to resurface the flight deck, and we did that at anchor in the Persian Gulf. They'd never done and none ever resurfaced the flight deck. But our flight deck was getting to the stage where, the approach was dangerous enough that once you came out of the wires, if you didn't turn just right or hit the wrong place, you slid a lot. So it got to where we said, okay, we're going to lose an airplane over the side after he lands, after he goes through a mission. This isn't good. So we took out 5 days for that. But other than that, yeah, the Midway did a really nice job.
So Craig, it sounded like the boiler techs held up okay. Don't we?
And probably the fuels officer too.
Jim, the ordinance you were talking about, it was getting tight with, where was the storehouse? Where was there a storehouse in the Middle East, or was it, we used to go into Sicily, I believe, to get our ordinance. So I mean, where did this ordinance come from? And was it coming, how did it get from the States over to where you were, from where it was down to the ship?
For the Pacific, most of our stuff was coming Pacific route. And if I'm not mistaken, most of it came through, oh gosh, I can't remember if it was, I know it ended up in Degar. That was the last point before it got to us was David Garcia. But where it came to from there varied. But it was a system-wide, at least the impression I got, since I wasn't directly involved in that, it was a system-wide. It wasn't like, oh, why don't you go ask the guys from the Med, because they got lots of these extra. I mean, the laser guided bomb kits were just dissipating at a rate not planned on.
How were
On
they
our
shipped?
side,
How were they
David.
shipped? Were they shipped by ship or by air? How did they get from where they?
Oh, the kits they did by air, because the kits are small. I mean, the kit's just a little thing they call the birdie that goes on the front of the airplane and some special fins for the DAC. The bomb itself, obviously, is the big thing, and so
Right.
that's generic. You can drop it iron or you can put a kit on it. So the kits themselves weren't that big, so they were coming by air primarily.
On the Red Sea side, everything flew into Jeddah, Saudi Arabia, ended up on the pier, and John and I and the Seattle picked up whatever they brought in, and within 2 days it was in the carrier battle group. But we would spend what 24 to 36 hours and load out. John, you're still on mute.
Yeah, we would say, so anywhere from 24 to 36 hours, and it was usually working port type of situation. It was never Liberty port, but yeah, it was more of the specialized weapons, so more like walleyes, things like that. The iron bombs, they were out there. We'd get them from an AO or something like that. But I remember Lieutenant Commander Darby, I think, went on to become Admiral Darby. He was the suppo at the beginning of our deployment, and after the shooting started, and we'd see the news reports talking about with the laser guided munitions. He was sort of like furious and like, we're not going to be able to keep up with this. He called it right from the beginning, because it's the rate that we're going through these laser guided munitions. We're going to be out of them before you know it. It's just going to be all iron bombs on there. And then in some of the books that I've read, the vast majority of the ordnance that was dropped between the Navy and the Air Force, it was mostly iron bombs. It wasn't laser guided munitions. Like, everyone in the States thinks it was, just like a video game, and it wasn't.
Well, we had moved those iron bombs back and forth from deck to deck over the previous decade, so it was good to have them land on a target.
Yeah. Yeah, and just the amount of ordnance out there. So the carrier come in on the port side, and we would stage a lot of the bombs on the starboard side of the ship. And I have pictures, like, you cannot walk on the deck on the starboard side of the ship. It literally, from bow to stern, it was just pallets of bombs, 500 pounders and 1,000-pounder bombs, literally from stem to stern out there.
I've got a question. Were any of these the older munitions that kind of exacerbated the Forrestal fire, or were these all modern munitions?
At least from my end of things, all the ones I saw in airplanes were thermal coated, which were the newer ones. I don't know if the guys on Seattle saw any of the old ones that were just kind of smooth skin, but most of the ones we saw loaded on airplanes all had the thermal coating on them.
Yeah,
The Forrestal fire was mostly kicked off by 5-inch Zunis, and you guys weren't using those.
Yeah.
No.
And then I didn't know that's what it was called. That's what a bomb looked like to me. And I'm obviously now I know that sort of rough texture on the outside, that olive drab. So I think they were all thermal coated. I never saw a smooth bomb out there. So,
Jim, this is David again. I got another question. Obviously, you guys are human. There's a lot of adrenaline that goes. I can't even imagine personally trying to even land an airplane on an aircraft carrier. The adrenaline flushing it, but you guys do it all the time. But being in combat and doing a missioning, and then and seeing what you had to do, and you get back, you land. What did you do? How did you decompress? What's it like when you come back after a mission that's been pretty tough? How do you get ready to decompress and re-enter?
Well, first thing, obviously, you debrief everything that happened, let them know if you saw anything different, how your mission went, all that sort of stuff. And then, depending on the schedule, and again, we weren't that scheduled where you were going out probably within 24 hours. So you had time to basically go back to your room, unwind, depending on what the meal schedule was, you might be getting a meal. A lot of the things during combat, a lot of the things that you did during peacetime kind of take a background. Things change. For instance, we had an F-18, one of my F-18s, that had this nasty habit during Desert Shield of about every 10th mission, it would drop a sparrow in the water off the cat. We don't know why. There was some weight on wheels thing. There was something wrong. So he goes off the catapult, a sparrow comes off, and the paperwork on this is massive. It's like, okay, you dropped a sparrow in the water, it wasn't shot, what are we gonna do? And so it does it like the third day of the war, and it's kind of like, okay, so what? put another sparrow on it and launch it, you know? So a lot of the administrative stuff, a lot of the background stuff, a lot of things that I won't say weren't necessary, but are not top priority necessary, drop down quickly during combat ops. And you get down to the basics of, you still did your job, you still branch officers and division officers, and they had men to take care of and things like that. But you got the really important stuff done, and the other stuff either took care of itself or you took care of it when you had a chance.
Personally, how do you deal with that? Is it, I guess each person is kind of different in that regard, but as you observe people, and if some guys just have to get off and just be by themselves, other guys want to sit and talk about it. I mean, how does that work? I mean,
it varies, and I didn't do that so much at my level because I had 8 squadrons and 8 squadron COs who were in direct contact with their crews 24 hours a day basically, and so they would monitor. And we had a couple of folks that had some issues with the war itself, and do they want to do this? And then after a really tough mission, we'll come back and not sure they want to go out the next day, things like that. The skippers would talk to me. They pretty much handled it unless it got to an extreme stage where someone just didn't want to fly again. And in that case, but normally it was it just someone needed an extra day to kind of, like you said, decompress, to get over what was going on.
thanks, Captain.
So Jim, this is a picture from early January. Is this one of the new steel, or is this like a 1,000-pounder, right?
Yeah, or maybe it might be an 84, but yeah, it looks like it has thermal coating. You can see the little dimples up to the front there.
So it
Yep.
seems like we had all the dimples, John. It seems like this
Yeah,
is
that's what I'd say. Yeah.
This is what it looked like on the flight deck on any given day, just getting all these over to the carrier. And they weren't there when the next day they were gone. But this was just prep on the flight deck that day. So, but that was every day for us at that point in that early phase.
Yeah. The other thing, so dropping a sparrow on the side, we had a what was described as an incident as well, where a walleye along with a fork truck went into the drink. So, and yeah.
Yeah, and I'll bet if that had happened 3 months before, you'd still be filling that paperwork for
Yeah,
it.
exactly.
And as it is, it's like, okay, yeah, write them off. So it's.
I mean, the situation, the bombs are piled up on top of each other almost. Fork truck, we're in the med. Fork truck picks up the bombs in front of them, but doesn't realize the forks are hooked up to the bomb at the rail. And as it picks up, it drops over the rail. And
wasn't it in Jeddah?
The Jeddah was a different accident.
Oh, different missile.
So we had we had I didn't know what variety of a very expensive missile, not just a steel bomb, fell overboard in the med, which caused all kinds of havoc for the CO. But the guy that jumped off his fork truck as it backed up, hit the ship and sank 45 feet into the harbor. Not a good day either. The gunner was not having any fun. Or the suppo. I was glad I was navigator. I was port side. I had no problem.
Captain, you had mentioned ramping up so quickly. Going from dropping blue bombs to combat operations in 24 hours. That we had a similar situation where we came out of the yards and literally we were days out of the yards. We were out doing local ops in the vacapes on August 2nd. And that's when we were actually headed back to Earl. And we told Nana, head down to Craney Island immediately. You're refueling, then head over to Yorktown to rearm, and you're leaving. And we went from out of the yards to full, prepared for combat operations within days as well. It was impressive to see an organization move as fast and efficiently as that I saw there. I mean, we got everything you needed. There was no red tape. Whatever was needed,
Right.
All the yard work done. We had contractors all over the place. We got back up to Earl to reload, to rearm actually, so we didn't have to go to Yorktown. But it was just like nonstop day and night. And Dan, right? I mean, cargo trains pulling up full of bombs, just loading 24/7.
It was an amazing logistics operation to get the battle group ready. The longshore, on the piers in Norfolk, for all the general stores, the amount of effort that was put in 24/7 to get all the ships ready, amazing. But the delay between Norfolk and Naval Weapons Station Earl allowed us to have family get to the pier. For those that could, there was a pier full of family members when we pulled away. So it was. I think everybody had got it that this was what we were training for
Right.
the past year. We've been training and just doing leapfrogs. Here we were about to go do the job. So 3 weeks later, it seemed like we were already in the Red Sea.
Yeah.
From that moment, 3 weeks later, we were doing operations in the Red Sea.
Yeah.
So it was good stuff. We did have a helicopter accident at sea. We had an engine failure. We had 2 ships alongside. I don't believe, I'm not sure, John, if both aircraft were in the air. But they went from an engine failure to both engines failed and in the water in 3 seconds. Did 2 emergency breakaways, boats in the water from the starboard side of I don't know which ship was on the starboard side, John.
I don't know. I don't
But they
recall.
were able to recover 3 out of 4 of the crewmen for the helicopter, and we searched for the next day for the 4th crew member. But the Red Sea is deep and holds on to things. So we did lose a sailor there, and a good crewman of the helicopter detachment. So I don't recall what month, John. Are you closer?
Yeah,
on
it was in February. End of
February.
February.
So before the end. Busy time, 2 ships alongside and just doing our thing. And all of a sudden, everything stops when there's an emergency.
But Captain, did your Air Wing do anything with the helping to keep the Iraqis pinned on the coast with the amphibious feint that we had going on there? Was there any air operations that supported that feint?
Yes, we had several strikes go into. Let me briefly tell you what the geography of the Northern Gulf was like. There was a huge island, which was pretty much marsh, called Bouillon Island, and that was right next to Shad al Arab. And just south of there was an island, a good-sized island called Falaka, and we did a lot of ordnance work on Falaka. Where nothing, was on the island to oppose a landing in that area, and there wasn't much to bomb there, as they would make comment. You get a target, say go up to Flocka and drop 10 rockeye in this area. It's like, well, there's nothing there. It's like, no, you need this, and it was just said, yeah, they're coming up north. And they're going to the legal operations in the Northern Gulf.
Thank you.
I think Rich had a photograph to share here. Hopefully I've given him access to the sharing capabilities. It's the middle button at the bottom. It says shared, Rich. He's our historian, but
And yeah, I got about 30 or 40 pictures of ammo on decks, missiles, what you call them, the bombs there. I don't know what kind they are, but trying to bring them up here.
all right.
I'll keep messing with it.
The
Dan, do you want to talk about it was the first cruise where we had the mishap with the bombs, right? Down the elevator shaft.
oh gosh,
That was the first deployment, right?
that was not Desert Storm.
Nah, you're right. It was who were we unloading? was that? What
So-
carrier was that?
I just feel comfortable that I was boilers officer and then navigator. I never had to touch a bomb. I, I had nothing to do with bombs, John. um, and I didn't have flight deck operations. You know, the crazy part was I happened to be officer of the deck during the underway replenishment where we had the helicopter accident. But all I could do was give green deck and hope that they got back, and they didn't. But the emergency breakaway worked perfectly. Everything we could do worked. Let's see what we got here, Rich.
Right, I just got some pictures of some of the ammo sitting on deck, getting ready to go someplace.
Yeah. So
Trying
if
to
you took
figure out-
if you took that picture and all where you see all the non-skid, fill them in with more bombs, that's what it looked like on the starboard side. So you literally, to get down, you have to walk on top of the bombs. There was no place to walk out there.
And then they wouldn't let you run across the winch deck, you know, because if you were trying to go from the wardroom to the bridge, you had to pick a way to go. And so you're either, you know, you're going main deck, inside, because there you go. This is what it would look like.
Yeah. something
Well,
like
As
that.
I said, that's the interim destination of the bombs. It went from there to a carrier, and then from the carrier, it went to where it wasn't a bomb anymore.
I have to say though, for my previous deployments, Jim, you know, we would load up everybody and the bombs came from you know, from a vessel to ours. We brought them to the carrier, then the carrier sent them back. Then we came back to Whiskey Anchorage. We put them back on and it was just, we moved them back and forth and to have a real mission and to be able to deliver them so that you deliver them on target. We were just ecstatic that we were putting them on target.
Yeah.
Even though we didn't fly the plane there.
Yeah, so the plane would have gone with empty stations if you guys weren't there. So it was much appreciated.
So I'm guessing if you take a few thousand pounds off your wings, after you launch and you're coming back, is the aircraft like a sports car, different from when you were heading out? What's it feel like as the pilot on this aircraft that has all this weight gone and you've burned fuel? Is it a totally different machine? Or is it
It's
just
not totally different. It obviously is a lot more maneuverable and a lot more responsive power wise, but it's not totally different. I mean, it's when you're loaded up with bombs, you have to be a little more careful flying the airplane, and obviously it's depending on how many and what type of bombs you're carrying, we deliver them, the airplane reacts quickly, and that's somewhat of a problem. I mentioned the mining hop that we lost the A6. You know, they're going in to get below the stuff at about 200 feet, and all of a sudden you drop nominally 3,000-4,000 pounds of ordnance. Well, your plane tends to go up. Well, you know, that's where the bullets were. You didn't want to go up, so you had to be aware of that and anticipate it, so that you didn't end up dropping your ordnance and saying, "Great, we're going to hit the target," and then end up becoming a target yourself.
And is there really such a thing called the $1 Million Man? We one of the helicopter pilots that we had on there, he was over on the America, and he's talking to a buddy of his from the academy and saying that his friend actually became the first $1 Million Man in his squadron. He dropped $1 million worth of ordnance. Is that a real thing in the aviation world?
No, we don't keep track of the cost or weight. We just keep track of where it hits. As long as it hits where you
All
aim
right.
it, we're not particular.
There's probably a ton of $1 million mans because that ordinance is not cheap.
Yeah, I know. I was gonna say,
Yeah, well,
it
yeah,
didn't take
some,
long.
particularly if you start getting into things like, you know, walleye and
Yeah.
some exotic stuff rather than, you know, harm, the aneration initials, or I don't know how much those cost, but it wouldn't take long to get into the millions quickly if you're shooting harm.
You know, Jim, you're talking about mining, and I'm old school. I did some mining in Vietnam. We mined Haiphong Harbor. I can remember a number of times where we went in there at, 50, 100 feet and dropped a ton of mines, on an F4 that was 500 pounders, but, you just drop them and then you did have to because the airplane wants to levitate after it's not so heavy.
Yeah, well, and the other thing, the Vietnam mining, and we would have done that with this, except we didn't have time from the tasking to the thing. They actually just, said, dropped DSTs, which are basically 500,000-pound bombs with special fuses. The mines they carried there were real mines, and those were, we called that the garbage can mission, because it's like carrying garbage cans. I mean, the front of them doesn't nice and smooth, it's flat. And those, you have to be real careful carrying those, because your drags, they're very heavy to begin with. They have a lot of drag, and yeah, they're real mines. The garbage can mission, if you get one of those, are tough. But DSTs are just regular bombs. Although again, you carry a lot of them and you drop them quick, and you're 3,000 pounds lighter in half a second. So the airplane does tend to go up.
So how does a DST work if it's operating as a mine or bomb? Is it?
It has a special fuse on the front, and you can either drop them on land or water. And it's kind of a nasty little thing because it's a fuse on the front, and it activates when the bomb impacts, but it doesn't blow up. And the fuse is such that, again, this is a nice little feature. The fuse doesn't go off when something approaches it, but as soon as it starts going away from it again is when it goes off. So one of these things land, you can cruise up to it or walk up to it, and then you're fine. You just can't leave, or else it's going to go off.
Right.
So it has a special fuse. It's a regular bomb body with special fuse.
So the water had to be shallow enough then. So these
Yeah.
were sitting on the bottom. Okay, all right, gotcha.
Right.
Gotcha. All right.
Yeah, that's what the big other mines I was talking about are more deep water mines.
Right. Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay.
As far as your training, I mean, do you train so you can drop all that stuff and feel the resistance or lack of, or the elevation, or are you trained for that, or is it the first time you do it, you experience it?
Unfortunately, in peacetime, it's rare when you get to drop real bombs or shoot real missiles. It's a big event. I mean, usually it's once or twice a year, and there's only so many per squadron, and so no, you don't get to train for that. Someone tells you they've done it before and be aware of this, and you have to be aware of it. But actually getting to do it is not something that most of the crews, I would say maybe 10% of the crews would have ever experienced that before.
It's amazing.
Jim, can you talk a little bit about the coordination with with Riyadh? Did you have an officer in there that was coordinating the air task order?
No, there was a Navy officer, Ho Chi Bien, Captain Bien, who ended up being a 3-star admiral, is a good friend of mine, who was the Navy representative in there. Actually, there was an admiral in there, but he was more administrative type. Ho Chi was the aviator in there, and he would coordinate, and you would tell him, hey, for instance, when we wanted to go to the Northern Gulf and hit the Spaslack, we sent word in, hey, we need to be tasking for a mission for this. Or he would give us information on, hey, they're looking to do this. What's the best way to do it? So we didn't have someone personally in there from the air wing, but we had a Navy rep in there and he was a CAG also. His air wing hadn't deployed, obviously. But so we had someone in there that was knowledgeable and kind of knew what we needed, what we wanted, and things like that.
Did he talk much about the rivalry with the Air Force and trying to, as far as getting missions and things like that? Because it's.
We didn't, because at least now the Red Sea guys probably may have had it a little different, but as I said, for us in the Persian Gulf, most of the stuff we did was coastline into 40 to 50 miles. That was up to Basra, which is the first big city, and of course all of Kuwait, things like that. So we didn't, and there weren't that many Air Force assets that came into that area. They worked some of that area, and we would coordinate with them, and we would provide some support. The Air Force had done away with their electronic warfare aircraft, and so my EA-6Bs would provide support for some of their strikes, things like that, and that was all coordinated through the ATO again, through the Air Tasking Corps. Now, all the competition with the
So
Air
those
Force
missiles-
started after the war.
Okay.
So those missiles that were going down smokestacks down in Baghdad, they were Air Force?
Yes, Baghdad was Air Force. There were no Navy assets the first night into, we were, as I said, into Basra and Kuwait.
Right.
All the Baghdad strikes were Air Force, and I think they were almost all 117s, if I'm not mistaken.
So Captain, the mission seems to have changed. So we fast forward a decade, you get into the early 2000s, and we get into the, the whole back into Iraq and Afghanistan. Is the whole, are the lessons learned from Desert Storm already replaced and into a whole new strategy with what happened in the 2000s? With this long drawn out conflict?
Well, I think it's I didn't fly in any of that, but I'm guessing that pretty much it's completely different in that there's not, although obviously there's an airplane everyone else now shot down, but there's not any big air defense system that's active all the time that you're flying into. So it's not like, gosh, they got 3 SAMs and we have to avoid them. They're all supposed to be non-active, and so the threat level is much lower now for Afghanistan and Iraq than it was during Desert Storm, where basically once you cross the beach, you were target. Now, yeah, you might get someone in the target area that has a shovel-fired missile you don't know about. Somebody might get shot down, but it's rare if that happens.
Yeah. Hard to believe 30 years has passed.
Yeah,
Wow.
it is.
It just doesn't seem possible.
Yes,
Well,
I was working as a civilian on base then.
Jerry, you were on which, you were in DC or?
Well, DC, yeah. Well, no, I'm sorry, Norfolk.
Oh, in North.
Yeah, I'm in DC area now, but I lived in Norfolk then.
So we greatly appreciate, Jim, you being available for us tonight to talk about this. Although the number of sailors that join us on an active call, we don't know what we're going to get when we put it out there. This video will be posted for the conversation. Our shipmates will be able to see it on the USS Seattle homepage. And it'll be out there for them to listen to and to watch the conversation. We have a little bit of time if anybody has any other questions for any member, anybody that was here. We continue to thank you for your participation in the Seattle Zoom calls. We are working hard to pull together a reunion. We are going to, looks like, David, if I'm not mistaken, we're moving ahead with a 22, not a 21 fall. And 22, we're looking at Charleston.
Yeah, Bill? Is Bill still on?
I don't see him.
Oh,
but,
okay,
I lost
Vic.
Bill.
Okay, Vic, you're still Vic there.
Yeah, Bill's
Yes,
talking about
Charleston, South
Charleston.
Carolina is the plan for the upcoming, and we're working on that.
So, Jim, we'd gotten together for almost a decade every year, and I would say we, but I've only been to the last 5 or 4. But the core group of plank holders really have pulled the USS Seattle Veterans Association from just an idea to getting together. You know, we've had some amazing experiences out, whether it's San Francisco or DC or they've been all over the country. So the Jacksonville time with Craig was amazing. Thank you, Craig. We had a good time in Jacksonville. But COVID has interfered with, we were going to do a Seattle reunion where we have a museum that's putting up information about the USS Seattle in the museum, and we didn't get to do that. And then this year we couldn't pull it off with all the restrictions as you're doing your planning. Couldn't pull it off. So we'll get to 22 and head to the beach. So we thank you for your sharing your experiences and all your memories from your duty, Jim, and thank you for your service. It has been a I don't want to cut anybody off for any questions. I just want to make sure I honor your time and pull us to a culmination here if we're wrapping up. Anybody else have any comments?
Thanks, Jim. Appreciate it.
Thank you.
I just,
Greg.
want, I just want to go on the record that, Jim, that we refer to it as combat logistics, not support ships. So. You know, you got to give us something, please.
Okay, got it.
Thanks.
I can't, just because we can keep up with the aircraft carrier doesn't mean that we could, yeah.
Well,
We have
I'd like
guns
to just
too.
give a shout out to Jim for taking his time to graciously share his experiences, and also to Craig, who continues to be our guiding light here to help us find and locate these experts that we would never have an opportunity to know how to find. And Craig, thank you so much. And Jim, thank you so much for the blessing.
Captain, who Jim knows well, that I also know well, it was the conduit to make the connection.
Dan, thanks a lot for
thank you.
including me. I'm going to sign off.
Well,
Thank you.
thank you.
Take care,
Thank
Pop.
you very much, Pop. Jim, I will make sure I mention to Peter that we ran into each other tonight. I'm sure you'll get hit up for a donation at some point in the next 2 weeks. I heard that that's a Dartmouth tradition for alumni.
Right.
Thank you, everybody. It has been a wonderful evening, and we'll give you back a little bit of time on the East Coast side. Let's stick with it. I don't know. Somebody's already yawning away here. This has been an excellent conversation. We will have many more, probably going to do one in 2 to 3 months, and we'll continue to, our membership is growing, actually. The Christmas newsletter we put out has really doubled our membership across the last 2 months. So I'm very happy with that.
That's good to hear the membership's growing.
Yes.
Because when I looked at the responses of the survey, it seems like we've got almost 100% of the members who plan on coming.
I have to go out. He's really antsy.
So the thing is, if we build up the membership, we should build up the reunion attendance.
I hope so. At this point, the attendance peaked at Washington, D.C. We had a good showing in after that, but the DC kind of being close to the East Coast and all that really boosted up the attendance. If we can pull this off for Charleston in 22 after 2 years of hiatus, let's have the problem of being multiple buses to get to events.
Amen.
So, amen. I look forward to seeing everybody, but we'll see you in a few months. And Jim, I'm sure we'll have a chance to talk again after I mentioned to Peter that we met.
Okay.
Everybody have a great night.
Thanks again, Jim.
Thank you so much.
Jim.
Good night, everyone.
Good night.